Hello and welcome to the Mover segment here on TV3. Tonight we're inside the residence of the Chief Executive Officer of the Ghana Chamber of Bulk Oil Distributors, Senyo Hosi. He's been in the news over the past 1 week talking about government indebtedness to the BDCs. We'll find out all about Senyo Hosi and what he represents. Thank you very much, Senyo, for welcoming us into your home.
You're welcome. It's a pleasure to have you here.
Great, Senyo. So how did it all start for you?
Our very humble beginnings, I must say. I'm born to an engineer and also a pastor and a baker, a caterer, a trained caterer. I was born in Lagos, in Nigeria, so started my early life there. Moved to Ghana at some point, and we lived in Adenta. And Adenta then was quite a very remote place. You'd be in your house and monkeys would just appear. You know, you could hardly even find public transport. Getting that far. You get somewhere around Medina and even get a walk. Went to school at Pantan Hospital. And went to Tema Secondary School, then University of Ghana, where I have attained all my degrees. My work life really started much earlier. In my very early stage, I worked at Kolebu before even going to Legon. I worked at Kolebu as an accounts assistant, technically a cashier. And went to school, started baking at some point, and baked and sold on campus. So while I was in school, I used to bake to take care of my siblings. I started off as a sales and marketing executive. So I had a van loaded with goods, go around, sell, run promotions. So I sold in all the markets. Sold in Okaishi, Malata Market, Ashaiman, what have you. And I had to travel around the country to sell. Occasionally I had to go to Burkina Faso here and there to get things done. At some stage I was promoted. I grew through the ranks and became, and that was just after a year, I had become in charge of business development for West Africa. I think after 4 months of working as a salesman, I rose to become in charge of business development for Ghana. Then I rose to become in charge of business development for West Africa, for the entire group.
How did you get into the petroleum business?
Okay, so once we had taken a decision to explore the opportunities in petroleum, I was the man to try and deliver that. So I had to spearhead that entire business goal. We got launched. I became the acting managing director at a point in time. Tried to set up the whole business, model the business. Then I had to oversee the divestiture of it. So after overseeing the divestiture of the stake of my principals, then I actually took just a seat, a non-executive seat on the board. And I was responsible for industry and regulatory cooperation so as to facilitate the interest of the business. So I was supposed to be everybody's friend within industry. So I started lobbying for my company at that time. And at a point, we realized that the challenges that were faced were not just corporate, they were more industry, and it was going to be very difficult for a given corporate to get something done. And I had my own views to it, and I felt that there was a social entrepreneurial opportunity to explore. And I took advantage of that. Spoke with members, and because I was a bit more friendly with everybody, people found it a bit more comfortable to engage with me. I have to be honest, the industry at the time was so fierce. Trust was one of the least things anybody had for anyone. And to that extent, nobody expected another industry player to represent, or probably another competitor to end up representing anybody.
And this chamber is made up of how many companies?
We have over 28 BDCs now who are members, but BDCs in general are about 35, 38. The numbers keep changing. I think I've been served with some notice, so I think it will be about 38. That's if the people have paid up. If they haven't, we will be probably talking about just 35. So most of the BDCs are in here, and they account for practically all the volumes that are BDC driven in the country. It's just been good. God has been kind and merciful. It's been quite generous to me with opportunities to help change industry and move industry to a healthier face.
I see you over the years fighting aggressively for the industry to ensure that things are done quite right. One of the major challenges you've had to address has been the issue of government indebtedness to the BDCs. But tell me, in setting up this whole establishment as a chamber, you must have gone through certain challenges.
Absolutely. Trying to build a chamber from nothing was not a joke. I started a chamber from my boot. All right, and it wasn't easy to do that. I was not funded for my interim time. For a good part of my time in my early days, I had to fund that myself because I believed in the goal. Trying to get the attention of policymakers was also not an easy thing. I was trying to get their attention, and the listening ear of the public wasn't easy because you had to drive and change policies in ways that will help the industry to be more productive to the economy. And that's always been my objective. It's not a matter of making sure a group of people are that satisfied with their function, but to make sure their interest is very much aligned with the interest of the state at the end of the day, okay? It's not just about persons. The roles that BDCs play are very critical to the everyday life of everybody. The cocoa seller's ability to get hair trade done, the market woman's ability to get hair trade done, the ambulance ability to really move patients from point A to point B to save lives, is also dependent on our function. So I see that bigger responsibility, and that's been the focus. How do we make sure we are viable and effective and productive to the economy?
What do you consider as your biggest achievements taking over this chamber over the past how many years?
We've been at this for over 3 years. I've been on this seat for 3 years now.
And what would you consider your biggest achievement?
My biggest achievement has been really to get policy makers, I would believe, to listen in and start realizing that this is not just a regular function, but it's a function of policy, and this must sustainably be structured to be productive within the economic space.
Now, as a young man growing up, what was your vision? What did you see yourself becoming?
I've always believed that I have a responsibility to be a bit more influential and productive as an agent of change.
There's a lot of talk about unemployment in Ghana today.
Something I'm very, very passionate about.
A lot of people get out of universities, there are no jobs. Industry is complaining that even the very few who come out of school do not match up to the requirements. What do you think is a fundamental problem?
I'm a student of policy, so I'm an economic policy analyst. And I'll speak more from an academic perspective than from a lobby perspective. I think the major problem we've had has probably been poor coordination in our policy making, and probably our measure of economic performance. Everybody gets carried away by inflation factors. Everybody gets carried away by GDP, that and all that. So you hear every politician telling you about GDP growth is what, 4%, 5%, I did the 8%, 10%. Your gross domestic product is a function of everybody's activity.
But the macroeconomic indicators are important.
They are important, but those are not the macroeconomic indicators that I think we should be focused on. You see, politicians are the ones who run policy. And if they get measured by the things that affect us more directly, okay, their efforts will be channeled to try and change that more positively for us. That is the problem that we have. So we are not scoring the people who are supposed to make the decisions that impact employment on the right scores. So they are answering the wrong questions. They answer the questions we are asking now, but probably we should change the questions. What's real unemployment rate? We should be talking about things about unemployment. We should stop talking about gross domestic product. We should talk about gross national income. It's a different score. What Ghanaians earn is what our governments and politicians should be talking about. And that's what we should be asking them. What's the GNI per capita? Because that is what we voted them for. If we take a GDP and a chunk of our GDP is a function of foreign productivity, as in the productivity of non-Ghanaians, then you wonder whether the policies are really
not exactly non-Ghanaians, but
I'm saying if a chunk of it, I didn't say it is,
okay,
just for record.
Right.
I didn't say it is. If a chunk of it is a function of the productivity of non-Ghanaians, then you may be misleading the public with the data you have.
Is that what
but if you want to focus,
paradigm shift.
But first in the economic speak. First, we should start talking about the GNI. Let's see the GNI scores at every point in time per capita. The next thing you want to score on is equality. All right, what level of equality do we have? Let's look at our GNI scores, our Gini scores, and see if our Gini scores are really well fitted to see, what fairly spread across the country. Is that improving? Means that we are getting progressive towards equality. We can't attain perfect equality, no. All right, so opportunity should be rightly there. Next thing we should ask, what's the employment rate? All right, inflation has a relationship with unemployment. But when you start asking those questions, I think are bigger questions. All the questions that we also answer now about GDP and inflation.
We do know that. We do know that the number of employed.
Oh no, not at all.
We don't know the unemployment rate.
We never know the unemployment rate. The data that the statistical service posts are not. It's not data that I would find more practical, because you don't go measuring employment by somebody earning income probably in the last 6 days. So if I just carried something for you and then it was what you paid me something for just that period, you call that a sustainable income? No, we should look at employment on sustainable income basis. Agric is supposed to be our mainstay. Agric is not economically engaging employment. We have a lot of arable land in Africa. Africa has about 60% of the world's uncultivated arable land. But we have what? 25% of our people hungry, who can't afford a meal a day. So that should just hit you. How can you sit on land that is big enough to feed the whole world, and yet you go hungry? That is where the opportunities for employment should now start driving.
Unfortunately, today, Agric's contribution to GDP has over the years consistently declined. It's even making just about 0.1% targeting in 2016, and that's a major difficulty. But let's just digress a bit from that and find out what has been the contribution of the petroleum industry to Ghana's economic development.
Everybody relies on petroleum. We can't talk about the contribution of the petroleum sector alone in GDP terms, all right? Because it's not something I believe in, for starters. And GDP is not a matter of your what do you call it? A matter of your volume of activity, but the volume of what? Your productivity. The BDC sector has not been that productive because the industry has largely made a lot of losses for a good while now. But that function is oiling the wheels of other parts of the economy, all right, to really get us to be productive. So the petroleum sector, every economy has to be driven now on oil. So that's why we fight over oil. It's critical for you to be productive, and for you to be productive, you need to run on fuel.
So, Senyo, you've moved from a young man who's baked bread, who's baked, who's done a number of businesses, and now to becoming the Chief Executive Officer of bulk oil distributors. There are a lot of young people out there who see you on a daily basis as a lobbyist and as an entrepreneur and as a CEO, and they want to be like you someday. What's the lesson in there for them?
Well, what I would have to tell everybody is get focused on your goal. Don't get focused on the praise. Focus on acquiring knowledge. Don't focus on passing exam. Focus on getting things done and not get focused on being seen to be doing things. When you are impacting and changing in your little corner, you get opportunities to really grow because you build skills and capacities of your own. Those who see you will really appreciate you for really who you are and what you get done, not who you try to show yourself to be.
All right, thank you very much, Senyo Hosi.
Always a pleasure, Paco.
Thank you for joining us on the program. Well, that's how we wrap up on our Mover segment tonight. My guest has been Senyo Hosi, the Chief Executive Officer of the Ghana Chamber of Bulk Oil Distributors. Over to the studios.